We are moving off Godot and not going anywhere. You'll be the first to find out if you're on our Discord. But I do want to highlight that this has been an extremely difficult decision for us. The Godot community is awesome. It was actually a key reason that we chose Godot in the first place when we were deciding how to build the mirror. So I just want to give a massive thank you to everyone in the community and especially the contributors. It's just absolutely amazing to be contributing so much of your time, your most valuable asset, to creating software that anyone can use. Like that's just absolutely incredible. Like love it. So thank you so much for that. So to give you some background on this decision, wanted to create this video and use it really kind of as like, hey, if you're developing a game, you're developing a world, you're developing a platform, I hope this video can be helpful. So wanted to recap on some of our architectural thoughts, some of our decisions, and then a bit of an Easter egg for what's going forward. So with that, I like to preface this with there's the question that runs around of okay, what on earth is the best language, and you'll get fierce opinions. But the senior engineer, when that senior engineer walks in the room, no, it's not what's the best language, it's what's the best tool for the job. That's the really critical important thing here. If you're not familiar with the mirror and what we've been doing, we're building a massive game platform, kind of like a next gen Roblox, all in one. For some background about myself, I built an online business in Second Life as a kid. I was selling 3D models, selling scripts, kind of. I hate to say mini games in a sense because they're like composable UGC assets, but games in and of themselves in a sense. Anyway, really cool stuff. Someone actually hacked Second Life, stole my 3D models, and then just started selling them themselves. And I'm like, what on earth? Like, what do I do here? So hence, it's been a dream ever since to build a new game platform with real ownership where you can create actually anything that you wish. And so as the mirror, we're the only open core platform where you can actually own the underlying code base. As far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong. If you build on Roblox, for example, like you're locked in, you don't own the underlying engine, it's not yours. You can't do anything with it, you don't really own it. So we're open core. Of course, that's why from day one, we always said, hey, we're going to build an open source. And that's why personally, I've always been so excited of like, oh, wow, there's actually finally a good open source game engine where you might have had questionable results, in the past 5, 10 years, depending on what year you choose. And so it's actually great to see something really starting to get up there compared to Unity and Unreal. So that was a key part of our decision as far as why we chose Godot and what we did. One of the biggest things though that's very important is the tooling ecosystem. So I've built games, been doing that, been doing a lot in the professional world in web development as well, and open to push back on this, but I view software development as an umbrella of really kind of three broad buckets or categories. First, you've got web development, and I would encapsulate everything in web development. So servers, databases, kind of sub branch. You got crypto and AI, both of which are different levels of hey, you're really in depth on the Python code or in depth on an implementation for an Ethereum client, and in depth on cryptography. Still, I'd bucket that within the web development sphere. Second, you've got game development, and all these have a bit of crossover. But third, you have the embedded system side. Of course, deep inside Rust, C++, C, things like that. Of course, when you get into game development, especially game engine development, that crosses over with the third bucket a good bit as far as like hardcore rendering implementations, low-level C++ code so that you can actually make sure your memory is optimized. On the high level of web development, you don't have to worry about that stuff quite a bit. And it's kind of led me to the realization of like, I don't think people realize like how good browsers are and all this tech, like the fact that we have such an ubiquitous distributed app that can run so many things built in a great sandboxed environment that's accessible worldwide, like that's incredible. Within the open source vein, like that community, those developers deserve so much credit for creating what is the browser today. It's so simple, it's so abstracted from what we see, but it's an amazing piece of software. There's so much that goes into it, and it's continually being developed. So with that too, highlighting and getting to my point is that the tooling ecosystem around the web is very, very built out. And so the largest projects I've worked on have been in JavaScript. And so it's my mistake was taking some of the tooling for granted that you have with it. And so, for example, with JavaScript, there are many valid complaints. One of the complaints is like, what the heck are all these node modules? Like, I import this package, and that package depends on a package, which then imports 100 packages after that. That can lead to security risks, like blah, blah, blah. Totally valid. But at the same time, it comes with a massive benefit of you get so much out of the box. Like, there's no, basically everything exists within the packages world of JavaScript. And if it doesn't exist, it's being developed. And then, of course, every 3 days, there's a new JavaScript framework. So lots of fun stuff there. But anyway, point is, whenever you have this full ecosystem built out, that's the ecosystem you've operated in for large projects. Of course, shifting that paradigm, it might be easy to make the assumptions of, oh, all this will be in other ecosystems when I get there, but that's not always the case. And so I think this is just one of the classic trade-offs of, working with newer software, versus, say if we were to have built the platform on Unity or Unreal, where you'll get things out of the box that the ecosystem has just contributed and built over time, be that proprietary tools or something that the open source community has built, CI/CD, like, you name it, that kind of stuff. We ended up having to do a lot of the tooling ourselves, which was actually a pretty heavy effort. I would further kind of categorize things when you're creating a big project into the two buckets of, okay, what are the things we expect that will be bad, and then what are the unexpected. The things that we expected would be pretty bad actually never really were that bad. It's more the unexpected. And so that's been one of the kind of recurring themes from doing this, working on this project for quite some time and building this. So with that too, this leads us a bit more into the architecture side. Once you shift your ecosystem paradigm, it's easy to bring in, hey, like, of course, the low level stuff will be there. Like in the expected issues bucket, you would think, okay, so I know that, in particular, my favorite package will not be there. Easy assumption. Expect that. But then, of course, you do come in thinking on the unexpected side of, well, the base low level stuff is there, HTTP. Yes, of course that's there. I can see it there, actually on the docs, even though I haven't like really done heavy in-depth stuff with it. Leading us to the point of, loosely, I would put it as HTTP in ecosystem one does not equal HTTP in ecosystem two. Of course, it's there. Yes, it works. This is, think of it broadly here, because the point is, like, yes, the low level stuff might be there, but then that comes with caveats. Going back to the scenario of, like, if you're building it within the browser, well, you have good browser tools just by default. Like, it's, of course, an HTTP request is TCP. You can open up the network tab and if that request failed. You can trace that very easily. Either the request failed or maybe the request didn't fire at all. You'll see that in the network tab. Now, shifting to a new runtime, very importantly, you may not have that safety net, even though, like, but that's kind of a low level assumption that, of course, I'll know if my HTTP request fired or if it didn't. If there's an error, things like that, that'll all show up. Not necessarily the case. And what I'm getting at is into one of the bigger issues that we ran into where, quite simply, like, of course, the app works fine when we're running it locally. And then we get into issues where we're running these server-side deployments. Our code runs the same Godot code, both client-side and server-side, actually. And that was to speed development, which happy to articulate that decision a bit more, but I think it was good overall. However, point is, when we're running Godot server-side, uh, didn't know some HTTP requests, especially for analytics, were getting dropped. And it's like, well, wait, what? Like, hold up. Like, we've been developing this, and everything looks great locally, and then we start to these are very hard issues to trace, because essentially you'd have to once again go back to tooling and set up your own monitoring software to do this correctly, or correct any, you kind of implement your own HTTP package. And even so, with our own implementations of HTTP, is more like low level stuff where HTTP was occasionally failing, and it just leads to a slew of so many issues there. So, pretty difficult decision there. We actually, on the HTTP side, another thing too is, like, well, yes, of course, low level HTTP is there, but then what's one level up from that? Well, let's get into promises for async HTTP and how to track whether that, actually got you the promise resolved, you got the result, or whether it was an error and it errored out. Um, Not there. So we actually had to implement our own promise library. And so, like, not that that's bad, but because it wasn't there when we were initially, like, it as in like a kind of a general agreed upon, like, often used promise library wasn't there, we implemented our own, which was fine, but we were already 6, 8 months into the project. No, it's like 9 or 10 months, I think. And then suddenly, like, great, we have our own promise library, we solved that problem, but now we have to redo all the work we did over the past 8 to 9 months, at least refactor all that part that involved HTTP, because now it needs to be moved to promises to the new paradigm. So it's just kind of like these things that start to crop up over time that really start to make things difficult. And so going back into the architecture a little bit, also one of the mistakes I made, and to be clear on all these, I take full responsibility for this. I we had a lot of good internal debate amongst the team for design decisions, for architecture decisions, and so none of this is like pointing fingers at anything. It's just I take responsibility for these mistakes. Of course, in software, like it's a pretty known, agreed upon thing of like, hey, don't have too many cooks in the kitchen. Don't have too many engineers working on the exact same thing, like because that's a recipe for disaster, and that's absolutely true. And but oftentimes that kind of logic applies to one layer. And so, because we have for example, the application layer, that logic is absolutely correct if you're in an application, just this slice, and you have 50 engineers working on that. That is a recipe for disaster. Don't do it. I've worked on projects where the same application had 100 plus developers for that application. Bad idea. Um, Now, where you can start to expand these, of course, is when you start to get into different domains, front end development, back end development, possibly DB if you want to separate that out, or DevOps. That's a very important one there. I should put that database under DevOps there. Anyway, and that's where it makes sense of like you won't run into that issue because these are such different domains of what you have to build the application with. So that said, part of our philosophy was, well, okay, so you have so many tools within the game engine. They're almost like a very rough comparison, containerized applications within themselves. You could argue that or argue against it. That was more the perspective we took of, okay, well, actually, we can scale this up pretty quickly to because these features are so isolated, and we need to move quickly to start building this to get this game platform out. And that led to issues nevertheless, though, where it actually would have been better because these pieces were more tightly coupled than we anticipated, than I anticipated, truthfully. And it would have made a lot more sense just to kind of actually move slowly in the beginning to make sure we do the architecture right. Because if you don't, like, it's like building a house. Well, then you're gonna have to rip out the foundation. Terrible, terrible scenario to be in. Not at all saying our code is terrible. You can go check it out. Enjoy, please. It's open source. But for a hyperbolic example, that's where these things do start to become a bit more of an issue if you don't do architecture right. I'm a big proponent of doing architecture right from the beginning. So with that, too many cooks in the kitchen. And yeah, so hopefully that lesson resonates. And one thing I touched on earlier a bit is the side of certainties versus uncertainties. And whenever you're making building a project, especially a massive one that can have anytime you're adding complexity, if you're adding in more layers of complexity, adding in more features, more you fill in the blank to it, it's you need to focus on like what is the distinguishing factor where that's important enough or okay enough for well meets the criteria for us to accept a bit more risk, accept an uncertainty within our stack, within our architecture. Because if you have a stack full of uncertainties, yeah, recipe for disaster. If you have a stack full of certainties, great, but then what's different about it? So of course there'll be some uncertainty. That's often your key angle of what and why you're building the product. And so this led us to some decisions there as far as, well, first of all, key part, as I mentioned earlier, is that, oh, amazing open source game engine. This is really cool. That's a big uncertainty for us, though, that we should have weighed a bit more early on as far as stability, for example. We were actually building on Godot 3 whenever we started the project. This was really late 2021. And Godot 3 was a stable version at the time. And quickly we ran into, though, of issues like, hey, we just need XYZ feature and it's not there. Oh, shiny object, it's in Godot 4. And then so like we started to like there's this kind of, especially with myself, like internal excitement of like, we can get this feature we really need if we upgrade to Godot 4. Yes, it's an alpha, but 3.x at the time has been pretty stable. I think we'll be okay. Whew, scary. That led to a lot of issues with crashes, memory issues, things like that. We should not have upgraded that earlier or that early. So big lesson there. And because it's kind of hard. And again, this is part of my I'm taking full responsibility for this, but paradigm shift coming from web development, where it's not as big of an issue in web development if you use the latest version of a package. And first of all, you'll discover the issues pretty quickly, and if so, then just okay, roll it back, the minor version, patch version, even the major if you need to, and then you'll just operate with that for a couple of months, and then you'll upgrade it later once it irons out. All as well. And so that was kind of the paradigm I took with it, but I didn't realize how big of a shift moving from Godot 3 to Godot 4 would be. And Godot 4 is awesome. Really, really good improvements there. And the engine just keeps getting better. However, so that led to some of our issues early on. So there's a lot of points I've made here, but all this really starts to add up. It's not like there's a singular factor for this decision because it's like a lot of these uncertainties added up, a lot of these issues added up, and ultimately we just want to deliver products faster. We have our feedback on our Discord, feedback from users, talking to developers has been awesome. We've even had some quotes that our platform is a dream come true. Big thank you for the excitement for what we're building. And then the second part of that is developers get a lot of people beating down our door of like, please add these features. And ultimately, if we have all these uncertainties and things like we got our architecture better, then it's hard for us to ship these features and just get it out there so you can keep on building stuff. Ultimately, we just need a faster ship speed. So that's a key part of this shift. So you're probably wondering yourself, well, what's important here for you? Should you choose Godot? And I would still link this back to what I started with, and that's that you need to choose the right tool for the job. Definitely really dig in here. And there's some, I mean, check out what has been made with Godot, some awesome applications. We've had some top ranking Steam stuff, which has been great to see, like with Brotato, for example. Um, and so very important to have all those considerations. But tool for the job, what is the mirror? Well, the mirror is a massive platform. You could think of it as like an MMO, but it's editable too, because we're the providing all the functionality of the game engine too, like whole big project. So there's so many good like 2D games, for example, with Godot. We were actually one of the first to well, for like a massive project to be pushing 3D hard on it. Other amazing ones out there. So we're just in that crowd of like, all right, we're pushing this forward, and it was working fine for the time, and still has been, but it still works fine. I should clarify. It's just that um, we ran into more speed bumps than I think we thought we would because you have 3D first of all. Second, you have physics. Thanks, Apple. You have physics after that, and then an incredibly hard problem. And Godot physics, there's been a lot of discussion in the community about its state, and it looks like there are some good updates coming. So we decided to move off of Godot physics and into Jolt. And so thought it'd be kind of drop-in replacement. Not the case whatsoever. That there's a lot to do there. I mean, I should say it's kind of smooth for like local stuff, but we've always been, hey, we're multiplayer, we're networked, so we're 3D, physics, and networked. Three really hard things within game development to all do right. And then this all links together a bit because then if we go back to my first mention earlier about the tooling ecosystem, well, now you have a bunch of uncertainties and some of this low level stuff may not even exist within the tooling ecosystem itself. So this it just gets, it all kind of starts to stack together. So I want to loop things back a bit and just once again say utmost respect and thank you to all the open source contributors, everyone who's contributed to Godot, been of support to us as the mirror with our open source code as well. It's very much appreciated. Still, like conceptually, it blows my mind of like there's just this amazing software. Like Godot is 10 years old now. Shout out to Ariel Manzer and Juan Lenietsky for starting this, open sourcing it 10 years ago. Like that's amazing. Just a massive personal sacrifice, personal dedication to say, hey, I'm just gonna build this and just give it to you for free. Incredible. So big thank you to you all. So what's next for the mirror? Well, our previous release was I for Infinity. Our next release is J. Not telling you the name just yet, but you might find the Easter egg if you are on our Discord. So with that, thank you so much. Very excited to keep on building. We have a lot of exciting stuff in store, and we hope to see you in the mirror. Take care.